everybody. I am Damian Edwards. This is
Fowler.
And we're going to talk to you about Aspire. We're going to get very quickly into code. Yeah, I just did that bit. We work at Microsoft on .NET. The first thing I want to say is that what we're about to talk about is available for you to use right now. We launched it a couple days ago. For those who didn't know, we initially launched a preview last November when .NET 8 came out. Funny fact, a year ago, we were on stage talking about performance or some such. And the background meetings were about, should we build another thing for like making cloud dev easier? But most importantly, what should we call it? And we were having a whole bunch of discussions about the naming before we'd written any code at all.
A fight.
I can't tell you what the name was back then because this is the official name now. But it's a year since then, and we've built this product literally from nothing in that last year. We've had a great time doing so. All right, that's the wrong machine. All right. As I said, it is available now. If you haven't already, you can update Visual Studio. If you're a Visual Studio user to 17.10, Aspire is included in the box, everything you need. If you're a .NET CLI user, you can go to the command line and type .NET workload install Aspire, and you can get the Aspire bits that way. And if you're a VS Code user, you'll need to do the .NET CLI thing, but you also want to make sure you update to C# Dev Kit to get the Aspire support. All this detail is available via that link. Follow that to the docs, and you can get yourself going. All right. That's it. I'm not going to tell you about Aspire. We're going to show you Aspire. So let me switch over to this other machine. All right, so I want you to imagine you're a new developer, you've landed in a team, and you've opened the solution for the first time. So I've just cloned this solution. This is actually a trimmed down version of our eShop app that we use for lots of our demos and stuff like that. It's not the full eShop. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but it has enough to kind of get the point across. So I look at this, okay, yeah, I've just cloned it. Hopefully it's ready to run, right? You want to be able to get running nice and quickly. I don't have a diagram because, yeah, I'm not that kind of dev. I didn't go looking for the docs. I just figured I'd get the code and figure out how it works. So I can see a basket API. I can see a catalog API. I scroll down. I've got some data library, some data manager app of some sort, some common library, and a web app. So I've got a rough idea of how this thing fits together. I've got a web app that talks to a couple of APIs. OK, I assume there's probably a database in there somewhere. What happens if I go ahead and try and run that? Well, straight off the bat, I've got more than one project. And so trying to run this is probably not going to be the right thing because it's just started one project. Like all it did was start whatever happened to be selected by Visual Studio automatically as the one to start after I cloned it, which is probably not going to be right? Because that's not checked into source control. Your startup, if you didn't know that, the startup project is actually in your VS user file, does not go into source control. So, OK, well, that didn't work, so we'll stop that. First thing I need to do is make all the apps start. So I'm going to right mouse click on the solution, bring up this dialog that's, I think, 27 years old now.
Who has seen this before? Does anyone do this already in your projects? Look at that. You're all pros. OK, good.
So it's already got some pre-configured, because obviously I've done this before on this machine. So I chose Basket API to start, Catalog API to start, the Data Manager to start, and the Web App to start. So I'll hit Apply.
In what order?
The default order.
OK, good.
Because why not? Like I'm just trying to get the app running so I can see it for the first time. OK?
Wonderful.
So I'll go ahead and say, great, let me start that app. Surely now everything will be fine. So now it's, it's a bit busier now. It's got to start 4 projects instead of 1 project. That's all good. We expect that. See a bunch of windows flashing up. OK, I've got my first exception. OK, that's to be expected. And it's
flash warning.
Saying something about, there's a lot of windows here. Let's make this a little easier to see. Hey? So it's saying, OK, connection string, exclamation point, do not put value here. Put it in user secrets is not valid. OK. So I'm getting the sense that I need to do more work to get this app working.
This is day one in every company, right?
Right. So like, OK, so why did it do that? Well, let me go over to this catalog API. And if I look in the app settings.development.json, no, there's nothing in there. If I look in app settings, well, there's nothing in there. Like, why is this doing that? Well, I know that I need to put a user secret. I need to put a connection string in a user secret, right? Like, this is pretty common if you're connecting to a database or some external system that isn't part of source control. You need to set up some user secrets. So I'm going to go ahead and try and do that first. Now, I've already done that previously, so I'm going to go here, manage user secrets. I'm going to comment out these connection strings that I need. I have another one, because I've got 4 projects. I have to do this in 4 places to get all this working. So
is that your secret?
Yeah.
You should hide that.
Yeah. I'm going to delete this as soon as we get off stage. It'll be fun. All right. OK, so now I've got that done. Let me F5. Let's see if this works now. I've got my connection strings. I did my passwords. I did all that. OK, so there's a lot of, OK, I'm seeing an image. That's good. But it just says it's loading. I'm not seeing anything else. Like, it looks like it's still spinning.
Just wait.
OK.
Okay.
So at this point, I probably want to see some logs. I'm not seeing an exception. So okay, let me go and find the logs. Oh dear. That one. Nope. That one. Oh, that's some errors. So maybe that's it. I actually don't know which project this is for. I launched 4, but I'm going to guess this is the one. It says, okay, error occurred. Oh, right, the database needs to be running, right? Of course, I need to run a database. So silly me. All right, so I happen to have already done the work to do this on the machine, but imagine you need to go and learn how to set up your databases. Turns out I've got some local instances of the things that I need to run this app already set up, so I'm going to go ahead and start all of those.
How convenient.
So you might be looking at this now and going, yeah, we do something similar, but we don't make people do this manually. We have a Docker Compose file that they also clone, and then they run that. Or maybe you have a PowerShell script that they use, or a shell script, or some other type of way that you help people get these dependencies up and running and configured correctly. OK, my database is running now. A few other things. Let me hit play. Is it going to work this time? OK, that one's not working. That one's not working. That's fine. It says it's a 404.
How is a 404?
Yeah. But most importantly, the app is now working. OK, so I've done enough to get the app working. It looks like most stuff is working. If I hit login, it actually goes off to my 𝗬𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗃 instance, which is running as well. Awesome. So I know I've got an example user in here, so I should be able to sign in. OK, so the app is functional. I can do stuff. That's fantastic to see. But we could probably do better. This is exactly the type of thing that we've gotten feedback at Microsoft and on our team about. Can you do something to make this type of experience better? Why is it everything is just spread out all over the place? As soon as I go from one project talking to a database to a project talking to an API, everything gets exponentially harder. It's just feel like it's fighting me all the time. So that's where 𝗬𝗲𝗀 comes in. So I'm going to add 𝗬𝗲𝗀 to this solution, and we'll see how it improves the experience. So I'm going to right mouse click up on the solution. I'm going to add new project, because everything's a project in .NET, of course. But this one is worth it, trust me. I know some of you are rolling your eyes going, another project, oh my gosh.
More project.
Trust me, this is a good one. So we're going to add this .NET Aspire app host project. Okay, so I'm going to hit next. And we'll call this one eShop.apphost. It'll probably tell me the directory is not empty because Git. It's like, OK, let's just delete the last one. We don't care about that. And we don't care about that one. OK, so we'll do that. Make it reevaluate it. There we go. All right, pretty easy. Let's get my app host. What is this thing? I've got this new project. If we scroll down and find it, what was in there? Well, not a lot, really. It's just a program CS file, and it's currently empty. All right, but there's a new API. I see this thing called distributedapplication.createBuilder, which looks very similar to webapplication.createBuilder, which was introduced in .NET 6. And the host I think we have host.builder now, createBuilder as well, for worker apps. So this is where we're going to describe our application, all the different pieces in C# to link it all together. So I can write code in here. I can say builder dot, what can I add here? What are the type of things you think you'd be able to add? Well, I can add connection strings. I can add containers. I can add executables. I can add projects. OK, that sounds cool. But first of all, I need to do some references and things like that. So I'm going to open up the app host project. And I'm going to cheat a little. I'm going to come over here to the toolbox. I'm going to grab myself some project references and add those in. So all I've done here is added a project reference from my app host project to the 4 projects that I was just starting before, right? 2 APIs, that data manager thing, and my web app. So that's easy. The next thing I'm going to do is add a couple of package references because I need to bring in some other types of things as well. So I want to add a hosting extension for Redis and a hosting extension for Postgres because those are the 2 kind of external resources that my application is using. OK? Sure, what's the worst that could happen? Yay. All right. So the next thing, now that I've got my dependencies set up here, I'm going to go ahead and grab a bunch of code. All right, so what is this code doing? It's pretty straightforward. I think it's somewhat self-explanatory, but it's a builder API for adding what we call resources. So everything I'm adding to this application model is a resource. And then you have different types of resources. We have containers, we have executables, we have .NET projects, and then we have things like parameters and connection strings, some higher level constructs that we're not going to get into too much right now. And then I have the ability to have references from one resource to another. So I can see here I've created a Redis and I've called it basket store. And because it's a C# and .NET, I just assign it to a variable. It's of type iResourceBuilder of Redis resource. I've got my database, which is an instance of Postgres, which has a database inside of it. And then I've got myself the 4 projects that we talked about, and you can see these calls to with reference that go ahead and actually say, hey, this one needs the database, and this one needs the basket store, and this one needs a reference to the basket API and the catalog API.
What is projects dot?
What's this thing here?
What is this?
This is just a bit of sleight of hand. So we added those project references in the CS proj before. We just generate a class that represents the project so that you don't have to put the path in. Okay, so like in the CS proj, right? There is a path to a project down here. We don't want you to have to duplicate that in the C#, so we just generate a type that has all that data in it for it. That's all it is.
Can you show it?
Just a marker type. I can F12
it, yeah.
Right? See? That's all it is.
There you go.
It's nothing magical. It's just a bunch of code that gets generated. It's actually more attributes than it is code, funnily enough, so you don't see it. Okay, so now I've done all of that. What do I do next? Well, I can now just set the app host as the startup project. One startup project. I don't have to futz around with that whole multiple startup project thing, worry about order and all that type of stuff. No, I just set it to app host, and I'm going to let the app host take care of orchestrating, starting all these things up for me. So if I hit F5 this time, I wonder what's going to happen. So it's starting the app host project. Okay. And I got one browser this time, and I've got, wow, this really cool looking dashboard. So this is the Aspire dashboard, and this is a core part of the development experience for Aspire. One thing I didn't say is that as we built Aspire, Aspire is very much developer first. Because we're .NET, we build stuff for developers, right? So when we set out to do this, our customer was developers. Now, it doesn't mean that if you have a DevOps team or a platform engineering team, you can't use this. Obviously, this has to fit in to the wider and developing roles that you're all used to in distributed computing. But the tools that we're talking about here, the experience that we're talking about here in Visual Studio is very much focused at you, the .NET developer. So I've got rows here that represent all the resources that have started. We can see there's some information going on. I've got links to logs, so if I click on that, I can actually see the console logs for each of these things, including the containers. This is the logs of the Postgres container as it started up. I've got endpoints for resources that describe themselves as having endpoints. I have those endpoints. So for my web app, if I click on that now, look at that, it loads up, and it keeps working. Like I didn't have to change anything, which is kind of cool, just because what Aspire does under the covers, which we'll see in a little bit, is really just codify the patterns that you're probably doing already. Like I need to move things into configuration so that they're not hard-coded in my code, and then I can change those values between environments. Aspire fundamentally is built on that premise, and you'll see that in just a couple of moments. Okay, what else can I see here? Well, if I click on the logs for the app, obviously I'm seeing logs for the app, but I've got some other stuff over here too. I've got this structured thing that just looks to be empty right now. I've got traces, which sounds interesting, but that's also empty. And then I've got metrics, which has a very enticing picture of a graph on it, if you're the sort of person who likes a chart or a graph, but that's empty as well. So we probably want to do something else to our app here to get those things working. But yeah, so far, not a bad start. Not a bad start. So let's go back to our app and do some more things here to get this a little bit more utilizing what's going on. Oh, one thing I didn't show that I want to show. Let me quickly open up the dashboard again. One thing that you can see about resources on the dashboard is not only what type of resource it is, was it a container, what endpoints are, but you can look at the details for it. And if I open up the details for my web app at the front here and scroll down, we actually show you all the environment variables that have been set for this resource. So there's the normal stuff you might be familiar with as an ASP.NET Core developer, like ASP.NET Core URLs, ASP.NET Core environment. But then there's a whole bunch of other stuff. We've got a stuff here to do with OTel, which we haven't talked about yet. And then we've got these services underscore values down here as well, which seem to be pointing to addresses. And they seem to be named after the other resources in my app. So we're starting to get a hint now about what's going on under the covers here, about injecting these values in so that you can then use them in your application code to wire all these apps up together. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do to try and make better use of what's going on in that dashboard is I'm going to add another project called a service defaults project. Now, this solution already has a common library. We saw it down there. It was called eshop.common. But that's fine. That's a very common pattern, right? You end up having a class library that has a bunch of code in it that you call from multiple projects. And we're, again, just codifying that as part of the Aspire sort of offering. So I've added this new project down here called service defaults. Again, it really just has one file in it by default. But what's different about this file, it's about 100 odd lines, if I recall, 100, 118 lines. This is what we think is the right starting point for getting this stuff to work. This turns on things like resiliency. So when you make calls over HTTP, it'll retry by default. okay, rather than just fail if you have some transient error. It turns on service discovery so that I don't have to hard code URLs. I can rely on friendly resource names and then have those URLs resolved at runtime. It also configures OpenTelemetry, which is an industry-wide standard that was put together by a bunch of cloud luminary companies in order to define how do we do telemetry from applications in production in a way that is interoperable. So if I take my app from one cloud, move it to another, the telemetry still works. So if I want to change the APM system I'm using to read all that telemetry, as long as it speaks OpenTelemetry, I can do that. I don't have to change my apps. So that's what OpenTelemetry is, configured by default. And lastly, we have default health checks. Health checks are the idea of endpoints in your application that you can hit over HTTP or TCP, get back some result that tells you about the health of the app. That's useful for monitoring and alerting, but it's also useful for production orchestration. Oh, this app is unhealthy right now. Let's not send any requests to it. Maybe I should fire up a new instance of that app and redirect traffic to that. That's what health checks is for. So this file gets you started with a lot of these features that already existed in .NET. We added service discovery as part of Aspire, but all the other stuff was actually there already. Yep. But we've brought it all together for you in this template for you to get started, and we intend for you to customize this. OK. So what else do I need to do? Well, I need to add some references to this from my other app. So I can just pick up service defaults and drop it on my web app. I can go up here and drop it on my data manager.
That's fancy.
I can go up here and drop it on my, everyone know that you could do this? This is how you can add project references. And then I can go up here and go all the way to the top and drop that in my basket API. Now they are all doing, that's been there for a couple of years.
That's showing off.
But you should clap for that.
That's just showing off. Don't clap for that.
So now I've added a project reference so I can just use this code. What do I actually do in my app? So if I go over to the program CS, I've already got some code in these applications that's kind of factored out, so it's nice and neat. I've got this builder.add application services. That's just code in this app. It's not part of Aspire. If I hit F12 over here, this is where it's setting up stuff that this app needs, setting up DI, that type of stuff. Well, instead of calling this add HTTP client down here, I'm going to call builder.add service defaults. That's one of the methods that got added by the service defaults project. And that's going to call all those other methods that we just saw before. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to map some default endpoints. So if I come down here to app.mapDefaultEndpoints, that's going to map those health check endpoints that we saw before as well. And then quickly, I'm going to go over and do the same thing in the catalog API. So we'll go and look in its program CS. We'll navigate to its application services. I'm going to come down here, and instead of calling add HTTP client, I'm going to call add service defaults. And then if we come back over to its program CS, we will also call map default endpoints. And that'll be enough for this.
To add one thing, so we have tooling built in for this stuff to make it more automatic. Damian's going through it to show you that what we're doing is not magic. Right? So you shouldn't be saying, oh, I need this tooling because it's doing all these things. It's literally adding code to your projects.
Right.
In the same way.
Exactly, exactly. All right, so if I run this again now, I wonder what changes, if anything. It builds, that's a good start. So all I did was add service defaults. I showed you the code, and then I made references to it, and then I called it. OK, so now we're going to give it a minute to warm up. I'll go ahead and start my front end. OK, so it's doing stuff. But now if I come back and I go over to things like structured, I'm starting to get those structured log information come through. That's all due to the OpenTelemetry configuration. I didn't have to do anything. All I did was call service defaults after adding that service defaults project. That code lives in your solution. It will likely change over time as this application changes. You have to add other sources. You might want to export OpenTelemetry or other places. But we get you started straight away. And the Aspire dashboard is set up to show this stuff by default. Similarly, I get distributed tracing. So when I hit the web app URL, I can see, look at this beautiful distributed trace view that I get now about everything that went on with regards to when I hit that front end. It looks like it made 3 parallel web requests. Yep. Because of the way Blazor renders, and I've got multiple components, they all called out to a service, and then those things called out to the catalog API, and I can get information about what's going on in my application there. Really, really easy to get started. Now, the other thing about this dashboard is that, yes, it's running locally. It's not Visual Studio exclusive. This is part of Aspire. It's brought in by the Aspire App Host project and the Aspire workload. If you're using the .NET CLI, if you're using VS Code or any other IDE, this works. Right? There's nothing about this that is proprietary. In fact, the dashboard is open source.
It's open source.
And it's available as a container image, so you can just run it standalone in any environment that you like, and it becomes an OTel endpoint that you can send OTel traffic to from any application, not just .NET applications, because OTel is an open standard. It's not just about .NET.
You should be aware the data is stored in memory. So if you were going to replace your like fully like structured APM vendor software with this, like just know that if it crashes, like you lose data. So
Yes.
you don't want to use this for like long-lived production data.
Exactly, and back to that point about being developer focused. This is the O dashboard, right? Like I deployed my thing into production, it's not working. I don't have time to wait for APM to spin up, to ingress all the data, to write that query and to see the thing. I just want to go to a thing and see, is my app emitting traces? Is it emitting metrics? Can I look at the console logs? You want to be able to do that practically instantly.
The first the first minute, right?
The first minute after you deploy.
Deployed is like, crap, it's not working. Look in logs, look in traces, see the entire end-to-end, see errors.
Right. And obviously during the local inner loop, this tells me my app is correctly egressing OpenTelemetry. For those who have tried to use OpenTelemetry today, you might have gone, okay, well, I got all the code. How do I know that it's working? Well, I need something locally that speaks OpenTelemetry so I can see it. So I have to set up Prometheus maybe, and Grafana, and that's
you do queries, and you get dashboards.
Right.
And you get,
and you download a dashboard maybe from someone else. So all out of the box, nice and easy to start. So the final thing I'm going to show you, and I'm going to hand over to David here, is that we talked about those health endpoints. The other thing it adds here are these health check endpoints. So this is healthy, beautiful, okay, healthy. That's all you need to know. My app is healthy, right?
I'll give you a raise.
You give me a raise? Thank you very much. One last thing I would show you, but I'm going to hand it over to David because I'm running out of time, is that the other part of Aspire is something called Aspire components. So if I go back to my application here, I want to get more data from the things that are talking to databases and talking to messaging systems. Things like your database client, Entity Framework Core, the Redis client, stackexchange.redis. I want those things to contribute their traces, their telemetry, and add health checks. So I know if my Redis is down, and then that affects the health of things that talk to my Redis. Does that make sense? So we have these things called components. I can come over to my catalog API. I can say add. I can say .NET Aspire package. Look at that, .NET Aspire package. And that opens the NuGet package manager, the standard one, but it has a query that's been pre-populated. And note it says where the package is owned by Aspire, and it is tagged with component. And these are all the Aspire components that the Aspire team and a lot of contributors from the community, I might add, have built these glue packages that take the existing client libraries out in the ecosystem and then add health checks, add telemetry, add metrics, make sure that they're injected in DI correctly, make sure you can configure stuff from configuration. That's all you need to do. You don't have to go find another client. You just put Aspire dot in front of it, and that's the Aspire version. All of these live in our repo. We expect this to grow over time. If you want to have one like this that isn't owned by us, that's fine. It's just a NuGet package. It just won't show up in this list, but you just go and get it separately, okay?
So one core thing that Damian said that may have gone unheard is these are glue. These packages are not creating abstractions. They're not trying to hide the client libraries. They're trying to glue OTel packages, configuration management, health checks, things you would have to go search for. They're pulling it into one package, right?
Right.
So you don't have to worry about using the Aspire package and then being tied into the Aspire model. No, the reason it's called Aspire Stack Exchange Redis is because we're actually exposing their APIs is passed through.
Right, and to prove that, here is my app. I've added the MPG SQL Entity Framework Core Aspire component. If I go over to the application services and I see where I'm setting up Entity Framework Core, I don't have to change this code in Entity Framework Core. What I can do is say builder.enrich the NPG SQL DB context, in this case the catalog DB context, and that will do the Aspire thing to this DB context so that when it talks to MPG SQL, I get all the stuff we just talked about. That's all you have to do. It actually means I can get rid of this execution strategy, because guess what? We enable retries by default. You don't have to remember to do it. It's just done for you by default with all the Aspire components.
So smart defaults, telemetry, health checks.
Health checks. And a lot of those things are based on code or lessons that we've learned from other teams at Microsoft who deploy stuff at scale. All right.
You can show configuration and the schema?
Oh, I could.
It's a pretty cool show.
Before I hand over to you. So I added that one component to this application. If you didn't notice, I said that we also make things configurable. So if I go into my app settings.json now, you'll note that there's an Aspire setting. OK, so I'll accept that. And then there's an MPG SQL, Entity Framework Core, PostgreSQL, and all those options that we have made configurable about this component are showing up as IntelliSense in the JSON file here. And that's because as part of doing Aspire components, we built a JSON schema feature that basically lets you put JSON schema fragments in a NuGet package, and then if you add them, they show up in the editor. This is really cool. So you add 3 packages, and you get the JSON schema from those 3 packages added to the app settings.json schema, which is kind of cool. All right. That's enough of me.
Awesome.
Do your stuff.
All right, so that was boring. I'm kidding. It was not boring. That was great. That was the 101, right? So everyone, Aspire is brand new. So if you don't know what's going on, it's fine, because this thing came out like 2 days ago. Right, so we've been working on this thing for a year, like shipping. We shipped 7 previews. Team has been working really hard. I want to show you some of the cool stuff we built on top of the core basics, right? One of the main things I think we discovered while building Aspire was this thing is C#. It's not YAML. I can extend it. I can abstract. I can build the interfaces, implementations. I can ship packages. I can do all the things that I kind of want to do today with Docker Compose. But it's tough because it's hard to compose and package YAML and like do those things.
Who copy and pastes YAML around between projects?
Every new project.
Everyone. Okay.
Yeah. The start of this project, I was working on eShop, and in the original eShop, I think there's like 3 compose files plus these settings files that get applied in different environments. And trying to wrangle that, it made me go, oh man, this is like really hard to compose.
This is opportunity.
It's really hard to compose. We should solve this. So here I have an application with Aspire. As Damian showed before, there's the app host and service defaults. This is the default Blazor web application with identity. So what we're going to build here is an application that I can log into and then sends me email so I can be confirmed, and that's my whole app, right?
Okay.
Super boring.
Which sounds simple. Wow, that's big. Sounds simple, but this is all about distributed computing. That's why it's called a distributed application builder.
That's right.
So as soon as you need to talk to something else, then you go, I want to make it reliable, so I probably need a queue. Like,
all these things.
Now my complexity just got super, super, super high.
So what I have right now is Postgres database with a persistent volume, so that it stays. And I have a database called IdentityDB. And then I have my application with a reference. This injects the connection string information into the app from the database.
So this is better than a diagram in my mind.
Oh yeah.
I see it, and I can just see
Object
instantly
graph, right?
how my app is, stitches together.
And the application is using an Aspire component that Damian just showed. It's wiring up MPG SQL DB context, passing in this string. This string maps to the string right here, right? IdentityDB. It's the same string right here. That's important.
Why do they have to match?
To read it. This is injecting a connection string. When you do with reference, it injects, if you look at my very proud super long dot comment that don't fit on the screen, it injects connection strings underscore resource name, which is IdentityDB, into this project. And then this application is catching the configuration and reading it. So the contract between the app host and the application is configuration. If you feel like this is magical, things are going on, you probably had code in your app settings that was connection strings, colon, this name. You were doing it anyway. We're just making it automatic for you, right? All right. So what happens by default in the template is we have this I email sender of T. I don't know why it's generic, but cool. What it does is when I log into my application, it will send a fake confirmation email by showing me a web page. Let me do this. Auth required. There you go. Register.
Everyone's seen this. This is new in .NET 8 that the Blazor app now has identity support, but this is basically identical to what we had in Razor Pages and MVC prior to that. ASP.NET Core Identity. We're just going to watch.
I got to make a real password.
Fowler type his password.
I was using one password, but now I'm using your computer. Ugh.
We got 39 minutes in.
PASSWORD1. This is my actual password for my email account, so if you try to hack me. uppercase
That's why you
P,
do
right?
uppercase P.
Uppercase
I
P.
literally told him this last night.
I just use one password. Like, just let me generate a fake password every time. All right. So what happens is I don't have an SMTP server. I don't have an email server set up. So I have this like super fake email confirmation flow in my app, right? There's code that says if I am the fake email server, show the actual confirmation inline. This helps me log in and do like basic things. And now I can log in and like, what's my account? Is it foo.com? Yay, works fine. Yay.
Okay.
That's boring. So what if we wanted to have a local SMTP server to test the actual
real SMTP,
real SMTP
not
server.
the fake, not even sending SMTP.
So we're going to live code a server on, I'm kidding, we won't do that.
That would be a good talk, though.
It would be a fun talk.
Just ask Copilot to do it. Come back next year.
All right, so I have a bunch of snippets here. And the point we want to show you is that you can extend the Aspire application model because this is code. It's not like you don't have to package a container. You don't have to put a thing on NuGet, you can just write more code to extend the app model. So there's a container called 𝗦𝗽𝗲𝗀𝗻, which is a little Node.js server. That's fine.
That's fine.
Not a problem.
Space for everyone.
It's a great Node.js server that we can use. I'm going to grab this snippet, and then we can talk about what this is, right? So I have this custom Aspire resource that's going to boot up 𝗦𝗽𝗲, and let me run the SMTP server locally, right? So
wait, that's only how many? Like
51 lines of code.
That's it.
So I have a container resource. There are these building blocks in the Aspire system. Containers, executables, parameters, packages. This happens to be a container resource. It has an SMTP endpoint and an HTTP endpoint. And this is the connection string. It just is SMTP, : the host and the port. Now, the host and the port aren't known up front.
Right.
Whenever you deploy this resource in any environment, we have to resolve what that port and host will become at runtime. So this is a placeholder that represents, I need the host for whatever the host ends up being after it's been deployed.
It's a promise for a host.
It's a promise, right?
Yeah.
So when you are local, it's like your container image running in Docker. When you're in a different environment, Kubernetes, maybe it's something else, right? So
it's probably local host when I'm running locally,
it's
right?
definitely local host,
Okay.
you hope. And then I have this extension method just to make the builder pattern work. So you call add 𝗦𝗽𝗲, and it adds the 𝗦𝗽𝗲 resource. It adds the container image, the registry, the tag. This is the pattern that we use, so you can track the versions and names. And it adds 2 endpoints. So there are these core APIs. You can add endpoints. You can add all these things to the actual resource.
So to your point before, you could have written all that code in the app host program CS file.
Good point. I could have not have built a resource. I could have just came here and done mail server equals builder add container.
Right.
Mail. Right.
You could have used the building blocks directly, added all the endpoints,
That's right.
added config, but the whole point here is you can just like refactor that into a class and a couple of methods, stick it in a NuGet package, and then now everyone can easily use 𝗦𝗽𝗲 as a container with the composability model of the app host API.
Exactly.
Right.
You have one person spend 5 hours figuring out how to get to these 10 lines, and everyone else benefits from that. So I could potentially put this package on NuGet and give you a 𝗦𝗽𝗲 resource for anyone, right, to use. I think that's a big benefit of what we're doing with code. All right, so now I will add my 𝗦𝗽𝗲 server. Let's do add 𝗦𝗽𝗲. There it is. I think I called it mail server in all my practice sessions before this talk. And I'm going to add a reference to this server. Why did that work?
Why did that work?
This overload takes the I resource with connection string. I am sorry about the naming.
That's very descriptive.
Just where we are.
I know what it is. It's a resource with a connection
Just very
string.
verbalist. Just get used to it. So the 𝗦𝗽𝗲 server, if you look very closely at what we did, this implemented I resource with connection string, which exposed this pattern, which makes with reference work, which injects that pattern into the application.
So that interface must have something on it that says, give me your connection string.
Correct.
So that I can then inject it into the config of anyone I called with reference on.
That's right.
All right. Makes sense, right? Left hand, right hand,
Awesome.
join them together.
Awesome. So I'll launch the app again, and we can see what it did.
Okay.
So it injected, let's see, in the web application, I should have details. If I look at the environment, there should be a connection strings underscore 𝗦𝗽𝗲 server. There it is. SMTP localhost blah. It got resolved. Those placeholders got resolved into real ports. All right, and now I should have a 𝗦𝗽𝗲 server. And if I look here, here's my super cool SMTP server. This is my dev time mailbox. And remember, the goal is to get rid of the fake code in your app and to test the actual, make it as real as possible.
Right.
All right. Next step is to actually change the implementation of the I email sender to something more realistic.
Something that sends mail, for example.
That would make sense.
Okay.
All right. So let's do mail extensions. We love extensions. All right. More code here. The SMTP client. Did I have to copy? All right. This thing can go away. All right. So here I have a hand-rolled custom component. We don't have a SMTP component built into Aspire, but I'm going to roll my own, right?
Glue library.
Yeah, so here's an example of gluing things together. So what's happening? The app host is writing a connection string called mail server into the configuration. The component, when I call add SMTP client, is going to read that name, get the format. It's a URL. We parse the URL. We create a .NET SMTP client. This has been around since
forever.
2001, I don't know how long, 20 years, right?
23 years.
If it has passwords, we set it up. Then we add a custom OpenTelemetry source so we can report telemetry around the send mail. Turns out SMTP was out before OpenTelemetry.
Really?
It's not built in.
Anyone know how old SMTP is?
20.
I said like 60 years. That's probably overshot it, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty darn old.
So I'm making a custom activity source, and I have my iFTP client. This is my own client.
Okay.
And whenever someone calls send mail, I'm going to start an activity, which is a little span, and I'm going to like report that
That's for
that happened,
tracing,
right? For
So
tracing.
this is how you say this thing is happening, and it might have like children things that happen underneath
Correct.
it. That's called an activity in .NET.
That's right.
That gets translated into that OpenTelemetry stuff that gives me that nice chart. Okay.
Beautiful. Okay, so now I have this. Now I should be able to, in my program CS, I have to add builder.add SMTP client, and the name here has to match the name in the app host. Were you paying attention? There'll be a test afterwards, right? Mail server matches mail server, right? That's all good.
Because of that config key, right?
That's right. That's right. Now we have to actually add an SMTP mail sender. So I'm going to go to the NoOp mail sender, and here's the NoOp one. And I'm going to copy this code over to the NoOp mail sender. Super simple. All right, SMTP. Oh, show that. SMTP client. All right. Then we have to add this to our DI container. Let me just copy paste this and do SMTP email sender. Perfect. Now I have wired up the SMTP-based email sender. I could comment this out just to make people like less.
The one that came with the template, you don't need that
Right.
anymore.
Get rid of it.
Yep.
And we're going to send the mail via our, what's it called, our iSMTP mail client, which we're adding.
Right.
Right. It's going to read the mail server that's running locally on my machine,
Okay.
and it should send the mail to that mailbox.
And that mail server was running because you launched it via the app host, which you wrote a custom resource for,
That's right.
which booted it up via a container.
You got it.
Yeah.
So let's run this again. Let's see
Do I
what
get a
happens.
sticker?
No.
Oh, okay.
Customers only. All right, so now we have the mail server running. It's still going, right? It's right here. No mails yet. And let's do the same flow. Oh my gosh, did I lose the password? Oh, I lost the password. Let's add a new user.
Everyone knows what the password was.
Do they?
Yeah.
Oops, I didn't change the text. I should have gone somewhere on it. There, signed up.
Nice.
So now the text here is gone. There's no more fake email sender. If I go to MailDev and refresh, wrong MailDev. This is the right one. There we go. Here's the email from Foobar, fake email server. Can click on this and works well, right? Perfect.
Hang on. I mean, that's great. You should clap. But this is the point in the development cycle today where you kind of just go, well, I guess it worked. Like, what else can I look at? Like, I sent it here, and it's at the other place. It went through the pipes.
The whole flow.
Right? And it worked. But this is why OpenTelemetry is so powerful, right? Because now, can you show us? Can you prove that it worked? What did it do?
We should show what happened. So here's the trace that happened.
Okay.
Right, so here's the application. We want to look at the registration flow. And you can see, where is my open? This is the wrong one. That's confirmation. Register. This one. Ha ha.
Oh,
ha, ha, ha.
there it is.
You thought I demo filled, huh? So here's the application. These are the outbound requests from my application. The request came in to register. This is the post, I believe. And this is the outbound mail to be sent to the mail server.
Sent to the mail,
right?
okay.
And it has the actual name here, mail server. So my tracing showed up. And if you look at the span, it might show the to and the from, because I put those in the attributes.
Oh, right.
So you can kind of like, as a dev, it's really hard to appreciate telemetry because you don't see it until it's in prod. So this shifts it all the way left, so that on your dev machine, you can appreciate the spans, the metrics, the logs, all those things.
Like today, I would either attach the debugger and pause and step through and like hover over the variables and see the stuff as it happened, or I'd let it spit out logs, and then I'd scroll back and read through the logs.
And you hope for the best. All right.
Nice.
So we don't have much time left. Let me try to stick the landing with something kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So if you were going to build this mail server, you would not send mails from the application. That would not scale.
I would never have done that, no.
Black Friday or like some crazy time frame where you get a spike in logins, your web server's dying, and you have to scale it out.
Right.
So we need a queue.
We need to get the mail sending out of the web app.
Push the mail sending off to a different background worker. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So let's attempt to do that with Service Bus.
Okay.
Because we're at build and Azure is our cloud and we're going to use Service Bus.
Okay, that's fine.
I could use RabbitMQ, I could use something else, but maybe I want to actually go to production with Service Bus.
Well, not only that, I think
Yeah.
a lot of people here are probably using Azure.
That's right, yeah.
Hands up, who's using Azure? Well, then it's relevant.
Who's not using
Azure?
Azure? Who's
Good.
not using Azure? Put your hands down, I want that. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is build a worker application. Let's do add new project. I need a worker. There's no specific Aspire worker template. This is just our normal worker service.
Well, there's no specific Aspire Blazor template or an
Exactly.
Aspire Web API. They're just
important.
normal ASP.NET Core projects.
Oh no, this is not empty. All right, same thing you just did.
Yeah.
Add the worker, see if we can do this. And you can see this in list in Aspire Orchestration. So you don't have to do all the work that Damian did. We have this kind of
If you're in Visual Studio, there's
Yes.
just a checkbox,
It's
and
a
it
lot
does it
of
for
tools.
you. Right?
Yep. Did that, it wired up service defaults. So now we need to move the SMTP logic over from the main app to the worker app. So I
Okay.
just drag this file over here just so I have this add SMTP client feature,
Okay.
right?
Okay, you're just moving that code.
Copy the code over.
Okay.
Nothing special is yet. It's not building for some sure. Oh, I need the package. I'm going to copy the packages as well. Add open telemetry. Wait, didn't it add the service default?
Did it add service defaults?
It may not have. Where's our tooling team? Oh, I couldn't find the pattern.
Could have just dragged it like I did before. It would have been a lot quicker.
That is showing off.
Okay.
All right, added the reference. Now it's building. So the same code we had in our program CS that added the mail server, I'm going to cut that and paste it over to this application, which means we have to also move the reference in the app host from here to here. Because the app host member is going to send mail to a queue, and then it will
Right.
pull it off somewhere else and then run, right?
So you got 3 minutes to add the queue. Let's go.
Let's do it. Okay. Let's
go.
Okay. So now we're going to add Service Bus. The app model is extensible. We actually have packages built for more than just Redis and those packages. We have packages for Azure as well. So let me add an Aspire package. Search for Azure. We're going to use Azure Service Bus. There it is. This is the Aspire hosting Azure Service Bus. The hosting packages are ones that are in the app host. That's why it's called hosting. SB equals to, where's Copilot? Help me out. Add Azure Service Bus SB, and we're going to add a queue emails.
Okay, so we're not running Service Bus locally because you can't,
Right.
but we're adding it to the hosting project.
Right.
So something, like what's going to happen? Like how's
Right.
that going to work?
Right. Oh, you want to answer?
Oh.
So normally, you would have to go to the docs, and the docs will tell you to go to the portal, click a ton of times. No shit to the docs. Docs are great, by the way. But it's a lot of stuff to learn to just get started using the core APIs, right? What I really want is give me like a really cheap or free configured Azure resource that I don't have to configure with some smart defaults, and then if I want to configure it, I could do more.
Because I'm deving. It's just developing.
Exactly.
I just want to get something running right now. I'm trying it out.
So I could come here on connected services, and I can do Azure provisioning settings, right?
Yeah,
The
just
credentials are
click
not
that.
set.
That's fine.
Is it gonna work?
This was a great time for it to decide.
Do not use. Okay, this has like no. This doesn't have the thing. This is like,
It's the wrong account.
oh, it's the wrong account. I see.
I chose my personal account.
Aha. I can just charge you.
You just broadcast my personal email to everyone.
Did I? We can edit.
Fix it in post.
Fix it in post. All right, so I did that,
Okay.
and I should actually change one of the things. Okay, I did that.
Yep.
And what should happen now is when I launch the application, let's see what it does. Hopefully. Hopefully. Maybe. There's no code consuming it yet. This is
Right.
just
We're just getting a result.
declaring the resource to see what happens, right?
Okay.
You can see it saying
Oh.
compiling ARM template, creating ARM deployment, deploying the Azure resource.
It's deploying, like it's creating me a service bus in
It
Azure?
creates an Azure Service Bus resource remotely, shows the status locally. So now I can wait for deployment, and it should be done pretty quickly because this is a pretty fast resource. But the intent here is to, if you choose to go this route, we have this onboarding path where you don't have to spend a lot of time learning about RBAC and learning about how to configure things securely and manage daily. The goal is to have this like golden path for you deving Again, it's an Azure resource, a container, an executable, anything.
Right.
Any kind of resource.
Right. All right, so that was a lot. Go and install Aspire workload, try out your first Aspire app, try out a few of the components that we talked about, and if you're an Azure user, try out some of the Azure stuff. Stay in this room for the next talk to learn more about deploying these apps to Azure and some of the other tooling stuff that we didn't show you. And then finally, there's a QR code here about the .NET Aspire Learn path. If you want to learn more, you can follow this new Learn path that's up on Microsoft Learn. I think the first 3 or 4 modules are available now, but it's going to be like a dozen modules that are being built as we speak. .NET Conf, November this year, when .NET 9 comes out, maybe Aspire 9.
I'll go back.
And, and please, yeah, thanks a lot for coming. We will be at the booth later on to answer questions if you have them. Have a great build.
Awesome.